So guys, I want to do another tough video about black fatigue. And I want to talk about my experience of workplace bullying and sexual harassment and mental health discrimination at Southern Connecticut State University. But before I start, I want to say it is a little hard to talk about black fatigue because I think the way to say it is that, obviously every community has things to work on. Sometimes, when there is a race of people, there may be like some patterns of behavior that need to change, but it doesn't necessarily mean a stereotype. It just means that there needs to be, better thinking. Like in black culture, definitely there's still an issue of the thug, the gangster, and the hood nigga, and the BT 1000 or T1000, as Tommy Sotomayor says. Just like in the white community, there's issues with entitlement, and there's a lot of issues of entitlement, or how in Asian cultures, there's issues with objectifying women. Really, like there's always things that people can work on, and people who believe in black pride can say, hey, we need to stop this thug culture. There's people who can work on issues in the white community, maybe white pride. I'm not like white power, but like white pride, and be like, hey, we gotta fix issues in our own community. Or there could be women's movements that say, hey, we gotta fix the issue with entitlement. So like there's always things for different groups to work on. So I want to talk about my issue with black fatigue at Southern Connecticut State University. That I used to work there for about like 10 years, and I remember like when I worked the night shift, that's when I had a bunch of issues. That the first of all, there was this guy, and I'm gonna call him Jeff. Just change names. And he was a black guy, and when the first day he came to work, you know what, he was always like really cool, very hard worker. But the only bad thing about him the first day was that he was kind of like, like sagging his pants. You didn't know if you saw his belly button or his dick, really, because he was sagging his pants, and always his ass crack would be showing, really. So it's almost like that thing too when we think about people and how we represent ourselves. Like obviously, there are some jobs where you wear whatever, really, but obviously, the sagging pants culture, that's not appropriate for any workplace. Like I know some people who are into goth culture. Like I used to work at Bishop's Orchards, but there's this guy who was really into goth culture. You never thought about that, but he wouldn't be like wearing like designer pants or goth pants or whatever, really. Or I'm into professional wrestling, so I wouldn't be like kind of wearing like these really flashy clothes because I'm into professional wrestling, really. Like we always got to dress workplace appropriate, and he was definitely not somebody who did that. So that's also another issue because it's just a bad depiction of yourself, really. So one of the first things that happened was when we were taking out trash together, because I was showing him the ropes, really, he just whipped out his penis and he was peeing by the dumpster. And I kind of just learned over time, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, that he probably just had an issue of, thinking that this is and at Southern, there's a lot of people who work hard, and then there's a lot of people who get jobs where you really just do nothing and you sit around a lot, really. So I think that maybe he was kind of hoping to get a job like that, really. And I think he was kind of having that type of behavior of I can do whatever I want, really. And also, he had a lot of insecurity. Like I remember, sharing with people that I would donate, I'd do extreme couponing, and I would donate cereal and other things to charity, really. And he said something like that was the stupidest thing he ever heard, really. Like what he would be like, he said like what I should do was like be buying sandwich bags and putting my cereal in it and selling it at yard sales or other things like that. Like almost like whenever I kind of suggest something, he would always kind of undermine me. Or I remember like one time there was a retirement party for one of the older workers, and they mentioned something about and somebody mentioned about one of the older workers working a lot more overtime than working a lot of overtime, and then this guy Jeff was elbowing me on the shoulders, like say, hey, he works harder than you, really, because everybody knew that I was a hard worker. But I think like Jeff was kind of jealous of me, so he was probably like, I'm just trying to insult me and be like, oh well, this guy is actually better than you, really. But it was also because decades ago at the job, really, there's infinite overtime, but now they've kind of like limit that. And then the other thing was that when I would order pizza, he would say things like, you need to go around to every employee in this building and take their order, really. When you order pizza, that means you have to go around and talk to everybody so they can put an order with you. And that used to happen a lot at Southern, where if I was ordering pizza from like Pizza Heaven or wherever, what happens is people will say, by the way, Byron, add this to your, add this to your, add this to your. So you're paying the tax, you're paying whatever really, and they're actually just you buy a $10 salad. I mean, they order a $10 salad really, but they're not paying for the tax and the tip really. You are, so it's kind of a way of ripping you off really. But also too, I was raised differently. Like I was like if my dad wanted to order pizza for himself really, he would not. I would not say, "Hey, Dad, I have extra money from work. Really, can you order me something?" He would knock him upside the head for adding something on really, because I was raised that that's disrespectful. Really, more than likely he would take that money and be like, "Oh, I'm putting it in the bank," or whatever. Really, he would pull over shell really. But that's also kind of like another issue in the black community is entitlement, or it's almost like somebody has something good going on, you either get jealous or you just kind of take advantage of that person, and that happens a lot really. And I kind of just think it stems from another thing that happens a lot in the black community, where it seems like if there's a black guy who's doing so very well, there's other people that get jealous and insecure. Or some people may say, hey, you know what, that person may have had advantages, or like me, I was adopted by a white family. Um, or another thing that happens at work is that there are a lot of people who have jobs where they sit around and do nothing really. So maybe, and it isn't just a racial thing, it's just, hey, they've been here longer really. So sometimes you may meet people like Jeffrey who's like, you know what, I'm just jealous of what other people have really. So I want to either bully people, or I want to be friends with the right people. I want to hustle as well really. But that was also the environment as well really. So for a long time, he would come into work drunk. He'd be speaking in different voices. Sometimes he'd be dancing in the classrooms, or sometimes he'd be doing things like, he'll be like hiding in classrooms and watching me work for a long time just to see me get startled from him, like hiding. And he'd be like sneaking, or he would like hiding in his car. Or sometimes when my friends would drive me home from work, he'd be like, I want to ride home with you guys because I want to see where Byron lives. I want to just know what his location looks like. Like always these types of like, really just like sketchy stuff, really. And, it's also what another thing that happens. I believe it's the movie Friday, really, where there's a lot of bullying. And in black culture, there's also a huge issue of bullying. And sometimes what happens is that there may be like a black guy who works hard, does the right thing, he's put together, he has a future. Then there's other black people who are like, oh, well, I want to make him mad so he gets in jail, or I want to just do whatever I can to mess up his life. There's that old expression in the black community of, black people don't deserve shit. A nigger, you niggers don't deserve shit. That comes from the Chappelle Show, I believe, when they're the Rick James skit where he's like, oh, you niggas don't deserve shit. You niggas don't deserve money, or what, something like that. When he was getting, they should have never gave you money. You niggas don't know how to appreciate shit. That was during the segment where Rick James was being punched in the legs by Charlie Murphy and Eddie Murphy. But that's also a true thing that people say about black people when they say, "Oh, black people don't deserve shit," because there's an issue in the black community of sometimes when there's a black person who works hard, does the right thing, people bully their ass, people trash them, people get jealous or call them an Uncle Tom. And they're like, "Oh, well, you're too soft, really. So therefore, I'm going to take advantage of you." And then there's a reason why there's many black people who are successful and they marry white people, or they marry Asian people, or they kind of hang out with other wealthy people. And they said, oh, well, and or they say something, there's two types of black people. There's the high end black people, then there's the niggas and the thugs and the low end black people. And this kind of like stems from all that really, of just, well, maybe he was like, okay, well, I'm street smart, I'm book smart, maybe I'm not going to be here for a long time, or maybe I'm too soft and easy, maybe I'm trying to, fuck with you. And it is what it is really. And I've said in psychology that what happens with a lot of people is who are bullies like this guy is sometimes in the psychology of bullies that they always want to push the envelope, see what they can get away with, and that's that really, and then the other thing that happened was that he almost assaulted me. He came to work drunk one day. I told him to stop taking advantage of me because he did something where, we had to clean bathrooms as well, really. So he would always force me and other people to clean the women's bathroom because he didn't want to clean the feminine products and whatever, really. And it gets to a point where that it's just being demeaning. It's just demeaning. Like, I work at a hospital, So sometimes managers would page me to clean up patient rooms, really, and actually they're supposed to be doing that. But what they try to do is be like, okay, no, since you have a cart, really, somebody shit on the floor, clean it up, really, and other things like that when they're supposed to be doing that. So it does feel demeaning. Or there's a room with a dead body, and it's like, oh well, you're gonna clean and make it tidy while there's a dead body being worked on or whatever, really, because we're not gonna do it. So DJ was doing that at Southern, where not a hospital but a college, where it's like, okay, you know what, it's my job to clean all the women's bathrooms, because he doesn't want to clean feminine products. And as I said, it's a demeaning. It's when you say, okay, you're doing the shit work, or the harder work or whatever. It is demeaning, really. So I remember like someone stopped taking advantage of me. He had to be restrained by a couple of people. He was yelling, cursing. He was speaking different voices, and he was clearly drunk. And he was jumping in my face. He was acting like a hood nigga, and whatever. And I've actually met some people who were white saying that he's a nigger, and he's living up to that nigger stereotype. Like, legitimately calling him a nigger behind his back because of how he behaved, really. And then also, I remember somebody also saying that more than likely he was a black kid with no black father, really. Like, he probably was one of those black kids that had a single mother and just let him do whatever the fuck he wants, really. And I've had white people say that about him behind his back, really. And I think in my mind, I felt those ways as well, really. And then in my mind, he killed me because that day my passion died, because I learned from that experience never ever ever be passionate about a workplace, because it seemed like every workplace I was going to, I was always dealing with bullying, or I was always being paired with some fuckhead like that, really. And there's that old saying that the day you think a job cares about you is the day that you're disappointed, because what they really were trying to do, and what I found out was that a lot of the head bosses were friends with Jeffrey's mom. So they were doing stuff like, hey, you know what, look out for this guy, or hey, you know what, do some favors to make sure he has a job for life, really. But at the expense of having good workers be thrown under the bus so he can continue this behavior. And I do understand that, there are people with drug and alcohol issues, and he was coming to work drunk and speaking in different voices and dancing and kind of very active, very antisocial, and instigating and bullying, and acting like a smartass, really. There is a point where if you want to help somebody, you have to put them in rehab or whatever. But you do not do something like say, hey, you're coming onto a college campus, you're doing all these messed up behavior, and we're going to do nothing about it, really, because we have other people to do that person's job, really. So he spent a couple months instigating me. Like, sometimes when he left work, he'd be like, just like a big asshole, like really just be like, hey, I'm doing your job and whatever, really. Or sometimes, I've seen him stand up and go in classrooms and other things like that, like just randomly just like dancing in place, really. Like, it's almost like, as I said before, I understand human psychology a lot more because I'm older and wiser. When I was in my younger 20s, I didn't. But like now as a 40-year-old, I understand that people do that because they know that it gets under your skin, really. They know that they're just being that they're being characters. It's like, as I said, it's testing what you get away with. But I left the night shift, and rightfully so. And the day that I left, because my boss has a big mouth, really, they told him and a few other people that I was going to a second shift. So what they wanted to do was actually make me clean like 400 rooms by myself. But fortunately, I called out sick that night. No, I used time off that night because I like, there's no way, because how it worked at Southern was you'd have to work all night, you'd have to do an overtime assignment, and then you had to come back and do the afternoon shift if you're changing your job, really. So they expect you to be up more than 24 hours, which is not the way to go, really. But that's just how they did it there. But it was also bad. I'm going to say his name, Richard Cogswell. Very bad manager, director, because I told him about some of the things, really. He blamed me and said it's your fault for not reporting it. It's your fault because, do you think anybody's going to come work here if you have a coworker like that? And what he did was that he actually said he wanted to go to HR with me and talk about these issues. But then the next day, he told my supervisor to write me up because I came into work late, and he was laughing about it. So now you discourage somebody from reporting, that type of behavior, really, and that's bad, really, because also Richard was a black man as well, really. So it kind of goes down to that hustling culture, and in Southern and a lot of jobs like that, there is a lot of like that hustler culture of like, okay, it's a lazy, laid back job. It's a job that's a state job, so have a union protecting you and whatever. Really, you can do whatever the fuck you want. So it's not a good look, really, because then it kind of goes into those stereotypes of African Americans being lazy, or because white people hustle, black people got to hustle as well, really. Um, so it's not good, but it also says something, as my dad said. Richard and other people are making $50,000 a year or more, but and part of their job is to make sure you don't have people like Jeffrey at this workplace because clearly you're seeing that you're clearly seeing the behavior you're getting. And then, as I said, there are some students who hang out in the academic buildings after hours. So imagine if they see a guy all drunk and messed up, really, and they record that and they put that on TikTok or whatever like that. you know um that does two things. There's a lot of black people who work at Southern. So again, you see a person act like a thug and a gangster and a hood nigga, there's gonna be a lot of people who be like, oh, maybe they're all like that because how this one person is representing themselves, really. Because there's a lot of people who do that when it comes to black people acting out. They'll say one's acting the fool, they're all acting the fool, or because some people are that racist, really. But the other part of it is that it's just really about a lot of just entitlement. And what he had to learn was that the way it works at Southern is that you have a shit job when you are new. You do the hardest jobs. You do the hardest work, and as you get older, the old people retire, and then you get the easy jobs, really. But I think that he really wanted to do that shortcut, really. And I also think that, like I said, he was very smart socially. He was a very manipulative, fake, nice person, and even when I talk to him and whatever, he tries to act like he's my friend, like, oh, well, I can kind of swerve you. And then he asks me always, like, why'd you quit the night shift? Why'd you quit the night shift? Why'd you quit the night shift? And he wants me to say, because, you were being a jerk to me. Then you'll go, boom, punch me in the face and whatever. So he thinks that, he feels power by triggering others. And there are people that do that. That's just somehow some people's psychology is. Sometimes, as the old saying goes, the Joker is one of those people that like to see the world burn, and then there's some people who like to see other people burn. Patricia Clark in the 48-hour film project, I've mentioned that person many times in many videos about how I share stories about struggling with suicidal thoughts, and she was making sarcastic gasping sounds when I was doing one of the 48 events in New Haven. But the point of it is, that you're always going to meet those types of people. And as I said, it's not good when it's not good in any community, but when it comes to black communities, it usually stems from maybe one person being jealous of another black person who may have a path in a future and success, really. And it may also kind of stem from what DJ was talking about. Yes, it is unfair when you are working all night and somebody else is sitting around all night. And it shouldn't be about what's the word? It should not be about seniority. It should be about we're all here for 8 hours and we all gotta work and pitch in and stuff like that. Or there's places that are understaffed. They have to come over and help out. Really, that's what a good job is. A bad job is certain people have to work hard all night and other people just sit around and do nothing. And then it's also bad when you create a situation where it's like, well, we all have to work together so the lazy people can do as much work as they want to, and the people who actually are hard workers have to overstep, really, and fill in. And it is was and it's bad. And I also think that sometimes, and this happens in the black community, is that sometimes there are some people who try to hustle or they're like, okay, well, because of racism, because of discrimination at jobs, because of white privilege, or how sometimes white people who are white traditionally in the workplace get a lot more benefits or get a lot more like perks or a lot more forgiveness or sometimes easier roles, really. Like they say in the black community, sometimes it's, last hired, first fired. Sometimes that turns into like, a generational trauma in the workplace where it's like, well, we got to hustle, we got to take advantage, we got to do the exact same thing. If you're going to get edges, we're going to make edges for ourselves, really. But that's never okay. Work is supposed to be work. And ultimately, the other thing too is that if you don't work hard and if you kind of are doing this gangsta hood nigga shit at work, you're killing yourself, really, because we all have like a work ethic and a drive, really. So it's ultimately like, you're gonna spend the rest of your life coming to work drunk, sleeping all night, really, and just fucking off all day. Usually people who work hard at work go home, but they have lots of projects, really. Like I have a YouTube channel. I'm talking about this racial commentary stuff, and I do other projects, and I work like 80 hours a week and stuff like that. If I was at my old job and I was doing the exact same DJ did, I'll probably be home, masturbating and having porn addiction like I used to. But this is why, we got to just, not be lazy. And also, too, when you work in a group, you got to just be fair. And if you say, hey, you know what, I don't think it's fair that other people are sitting around, and it's definitely a job of seniority, like the seniority people get everything good, then that's not the job for you. You gotta say, I gotta get a new job, or I gotta switch departments, or I gotta just, grit my teeth and deal with it if it's a job that you have to tolerate. But you cannot allow the negativity of a job to change you. But ultimately, the other issue in the black community is that if you're going to act like a hood nigga, if you're going to get in people's faces, you're going to act like that stereotype, you're actually killing your own community, because then there's other black people who work hard and have integrity, and they're like, maybe I should be a hood nigga like you guys. Or, hey, maybe I'm not going to work hard. I'm going to be lazy. I'm going to be ghetto. And I'm going to be all that stuff, really, because it seems like if that's the behavior that gets rewarded, if that behavior gets celebrated, why do that? Or, like I've said before, then there's some people that may say, you know what, I've been around these thugs and these ghetto and these hood niggas so much, I want a better job, so therefore I get a good paycheck, and then I move to Guilford, Connecticut, or other mostly white communities, and I get away from all the ghetto black people, and then I want to work with all the other white people. Then you create like the house Negro black person, where it's like, you know what, white is right because I don't see any like crazy behavior. Or sometimes meet people who are Uncle Asians, or they're black people hanging out with Asians because they're like, oh well, because there's stereotypes of them being hard workers and patient and polite, really, and then they're like, okay, well maybe I'll move to Japan because I want to get away from the niggas as much as I can, really. So ultimately, when you misbehave and you act like a thug, really, unfortunately, because of American racism, you represent your race no matter what you do, really. So if you act like a hood nigga and a ghetto ass gangster and a bully and all that stuff, that's those negative stereotypes of black people, you really hurt your own, you really hurt yourself, really. But as I also said too, that there's a lot of issues in other communities as well. In Japanese culture, it's very sexist. If a woman gets married, they have to quit their job and become the housewife. So there's this woman who's a nurse and she can save a lot of people. Or there's this woman who's working on the cure for cancer in Japan. Oh well, now she's got to be cooking for the men folk because there's a lot of sexism in that culture. Yes, there is a lot of white people who. There is times when there are sexual harassment. There's many times where I worked at where I went to college. I've had professors call me a nigger and say the word nigger a bunch of times, and that was not treated like a big deal. It was testing what you can get away with, really. And I've had professors in college who are white saying things like, "Oh, well, I got tenure. I don't have to care," or we're going to do projects where the students teach the class and the professor sits on their ass the entire semester, really. That's all white privilege of of white people saying, you know what, I can test the boundaries. I can try to get away with what I can get away with, really. I can earn that check by hustling people. And then you have white bosses that don't really do anything because that racism of, oh, well, if it's a black person, I'm more harder because of that role of expecting more from black people. But if it's a white person doing the exact same thing, they'll expect less. They would just kind of be cool with it because there's always that stereotype of, well, black people are mediocre, so therefore their behavior's under a microscope. But it's kind of turned into, sometimes when people act ghetto and thug at in the workplace, sometimes their black employers will either tolerate that more, sometimes they won't tolerate it, and sometimes they'll just like ignore it and let it go and say, "Oh, that's the culture, really." So it's unfortunate. It's a mess, really. But yeah, you just don't bring that ghetto gangster stuff in the workplace. You have integrity, and if it's a job with a lot of people like that, then that's not the job for you or anybody. It's sad. Jeffrey's a really great guy. He's a smart guy, but he just can't. That's just not. He's just killing himself by doing that because he's not bringing the best. We're roughly the same age. He's me. He's a little bit older. So is he 40 doing this shit? What's gonna happen when he's 50, 60, 70, and everything like that? Really, So hopefully, it turns the life around. And I also know that it's hard to look at yourself and look at your weaknesses, but he needs to be doing that. Um, I have issues that I need to work on as well. Really, as well. I'm not perfect either, but there's no excuse for coming into the workplace drunk and all messed up and hustling people and taking advantage of people. And he was also calling me retarded and stupid because some people know that I'm socially awkward. So, oh, well, you're doing mental health discrimination. And also, he showed me his penis because he was whipping out his dick and peeing my dumpsters. But, it's unfortunate. But, it is what it is, really, So, hopefully it gets better.